Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think the keynote speech by Mzee Kiriro was quite extensive. It covered a number of issues that, from the perspective of the farmers' organizations, is what they would like to see changing in order to transform and modernize what we call the small-scale farming system in Africa. I will start by highlighting some of the issues that, some of the challenges that the keynote speaker referred to, and then I'll go into some other issues in a bid to complement his intervention. Some of the issues he raised as challenges is that many small farmers are actually, they are net food buyers, and therefore they get affected by what happens in the markets and the food prices, etc. And that some of them are actually falling into a dependency kind of syndrome and becoming dependent on food aid, and they're moving into increasing the caseloads of food assistance, which is worrying from a perspective of a small farmer. Another challenge highlighted was globalization. The liberalized trade environment brings with it considerable challenges to small farmers. Research and technology, the gender youth issue, the need to empower gender and youth, cost of inputs, price volatility of commodities. These are just some of the challenges, and you could add to these many more. If we just think of the coffee problems Kwadu just raised when we started the conference. He asked some 20+ questions, and I think it was reflecting really the typology of a small farmer and the multitude of issues that he has to face. So one could add quite a number. I have also to say that we have been talking about these constraints and these issues also for quite some time. They're not necessarily new. On the next slide, I really want to just highlight the magnitude of this sector in the world. The figures speak by themselves. 91% of the planet's 1.5 billion hectares of agricultural land are increasingly being devoted to agro-export commodities, biofuels, etc. But it is the millions of small farmers in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, who are producing the majority of the staple crops needed to feed the planet's rural and urban populations. This is a fact. The big commercial sector is not necessarily that attracted to some of the staple foods that are part of the diets of most of the population. Now, the FAO projections are saying that we need to increment production by 70% by 2050 to cope with demand. In Africa, we need to increase by more than twofold by 2050, as the population is expected to double. We need to ensure food supply in this continent to meet demand by a growing population, and also to meet the demand, the demand that is coming from a higher level of living costs, the higher level of incomes that we are seeing amongst the African population. And that increases the demand mainly on dairy and meat products. It pushes up demand. So these are the figures. Where is the food going to come from? So the question is, can smallholders achieve the goal of sustained increase in production and productivity? There are generally two views to this. There are the skeptics who say the new changes are just not favorable to the small-scale farmers. We're living in a different world now. We have supply chains increasingly organized by the big supermarkets who demand very strict quality, uniformity on the produce, timely delivery, certification, traceability, etc. We're also living in a globalized environment, and globalization brings with it quite some key challenges. Africa is losing its market share in the world agricultural markets. Africa is also losing market share in domestic markets. We're more and more relying in increasing. The climate becomes more unpredictable. It becomes more difficult for small farmers to cope. But there are also others with a counter-argument to that, saying these systems are small, they are diversified, they actually can build resilience better in some cases. Those who, as Kwadu said, would glorify small-scale farmers, or small-scale farming, or those who are not so skeptic, they argue that development of these farms not only contributes to the overall growth and development, but they directly improve the welfare of the poor. And this is also based on evidence of what's happening in the small-scale farming sector. And as I said, these systems, they are not predominant only in Africa. They have different structure in different continents, but they're also predominant in Asia, they're predominant in Latin America. The evidence is also shown that small farms in Asia have successfully achieved growth and welfare improvement through the Green Revolution. That is well documented. And that what we see as large farm advantages is also linked sometimes to some market failures and to some policy bias, a little bit against small farmers, which exacerbates the advantages of large-scale farming. Of course, there is no argument about economies of scale on large-scale farming. But there are also arguments in that sometimes the policy bias is basically not favoring these small-scale farmers, and therefore does not bring about the productive and competitiveness of this sector of farming. But small holdings can be effective, can be productive, provided the right technology is used, provided we do intensification. And then also others attribute other qualities to small-scale farming. Because of their size and diversity, they also contribute to the conservation of biodiversity, both plant genetic resources and animal genetic resources as well. So basically there is room for improvement. The systems may have to change. And I think change is just part of life. I think, I'm not sure there is an answer to the question, a yes or no question, but I think if you look into the Africa's small agricultural landscape, these are predominant systems. They are here to still stay for some time. They may need to change, and I think we all agree that a transformation needs to happen. I'll just move into another, just typifying the small farmers briefly. This is just for illustration purposes. You usually have perhaps three groups. Those who are globally competitive, they are embedded in agribusiness. Commodity producers, they adopt technology. You have those who are mainly working in the local market, many national markets. They have access to productive resources, but they also tend to be undercapitalized. And you have the subsistence farmer, we normally call subsistence farmer, living more on fragile livelihoods, limited access to productive resources, etc. I'm not sure that illustration can be seen clearly by you, but again, it really is just a graphic illustration of those different groups of small farmers. You have on the right down the subsistence farmers, mainly working on the local markets, with real access gaps in terms of accessing markets. You have another group of farmers, perhaps more working on a higher level, on a national level, on a national markets level. And you have closer on the blue area those who are working very close to the international markets and who are really somehow more integrated to the markets. And of course, as you move from one side to the other, those in that area have necessarily higher income than the ones on this corner. And perhaps what we need to see is people moving from this right-hand corner towards the middle and further towards the left-hand side. And of course, a lot of things have to happen. Institutions are there. The infrastructure becomes very key and critical as you move towards the more integrated systems within the market. But just like to highlight the role of institutions here, because one of the organization, the farmers' organizations, are actually part of the key institutions that need to be playing a role. So what you have then is kind of, in terms of scenarios or options in a changing market environment, is either you grow through specialization, diversification, commercialization, and focusing on commodities and high-value products. Others may have to seek off-farm income and become a part-time farmer. And others actually may have to follow a strategy to exit farming because it's just not viable for some. In some of the highlands, highly densely populated of this continent, the farm size is just not viable to sustain any viable economic activity on them. So those may have to exit. We are also seeing what we call push factor, which is a result of a situation of stagnation in the rural economy. Usually leads to those who are younger, the new generation, moving out. They're not going to be staying on the land and doing small-scale farming as their fathers were doing. They will move out, they move into other sectors, more attractive sectors, ICT, etc., and move to towns. This is already some of the highest rates of urbanization. Some of the things that should be happening in terms of transforming the landscape of small-scale farming in Africa is to look into the land market and the business environment. And some of the things that can help in changing the system is to use the stepping up and stepping out approach. Stepping up is really meaning that the more effective farmers increase their investment on the farm to raise productivity and output, and they expand their farm size. And stepping out, meaning the farmers with limited land and other resources, they change occupation, and they dedicate more time on non-farm activities. And in some cases, they basically migrate out of farming and then we get to urban areas. So change, I think, is the key. The illustration over there is just intends to place what I would call the context, the environment, the context in which these small farmers are operating. I think we tend to concentrate a lot of attention on what happens on the farm. And I think we tend to neglect what's happened, what is happening on the environment, on the context, on the proximate context around the small-scale farmer. He is inserted in a reality, be it national, be it regional, international. If you take the national reality, he is operating within a context where we have policies. Some of them are production support. In some cases, we have consumer support. Some of these policies have a very significant impact on what happens on the farm. If we promote cheap imports with the press production and cheap prices, and because we want to favor urban dwellers, we could have a counterproductive effect on production. The economy. What is the setting? For small farmers to prosper, they need to operate in a vibrant economy. We need to have services. There is need to have banking services, credit facilities. We are seeing now some examples. Normally, you wouldn't see a lot of support to small-scale farming in terms of financial services. But we're seeing some changes now. In Kenya, we have seen also some that was illustrated by the work of Equity Bank, with Agra, etc., where they're moving into working with small farmers. They're even coming up with new packages, insurance packages for small livestock farmers. These are innovations that some institutions are bringing about, but because there is money to be made in the small-scale sector farming, small-scale farming sector. So the economy, the environment, is private sector having a good environment to develop is very important, because that determines how vibrant are the agro dealers, the input suppliers, the seed producers, the seed sellers, the agro processors. I mean, there has to be an environment. The content has to be favorable to impact on the small-scale farmer. The institutions, farmers' organizations. We have some here, and of course, the keynote speaker is a leader of one of these farmers' organizations. They are extremely important in the transformation that has to happen in the rural areas. Yes, thank you. Cooperatives, other forms of organization. The small-scale farming sector is normally very fragmented, so organization is a must. And there are ways, innovative ways in looking into organization. Also, the keynote speaker has referred to business clusters, an innovation worth to look at. So I think the point I want to make here really is just that to say that there is a need to look into the sector in a system-wide approach. The sector cannot be analyzed in its isolation and just picking on the issues of productivity, per unit of land, etc. We need to look into the context. There is an equation, and we need to have the different components of the equation if we have to get a result. Few more slides just on unlocking the potential of small farmers in Africa. Considerable need to invest in public goods. A lot of what needs to happen on the contest is investment in public goods. To link markets to link farmers to market opportunities, whether they're local markets, they're regional or international, considerable investment needs to happen, and the public sector needs to pay attention to that. Infrastructure, transport, storage, information access, innovations, you name it. Connecting farmers to markets require connecting them to knowledge. I could finalize my remarks without touching the gender dimension. It was also touched upon by the keynote speaker. The data, again, are saying that 43% of the world's farmers, globally, women account for nearly half, around 43% of the world's farmers. But the contribution of women to agriculture in terms of labor force can go up to 60% in most countries, in many countries, and especially here in Africa. Now, the study by FAO has also revealed that if female farmers had the same access to resources, land, services, finance, etc., as men, they would produce 20 to 30% more food. And I think this is happening. So something needs to happen in relation to the gender dimension if we have to transform the rural landscape in terms of small-scale farming. Just two examples of experiences from some other emerging economies. In China, improvements on land rental markets have had favorable impacts on productivity, occupational structures, and welfare. China has abolished an agricultural tax and other taxes and fees since 2006. This is just a policy measure. And in China, 95% of the farmers are smaller than 2 hectares. They are really small farms. Well, Brazil established a Ministry of Agrarian Development in addition to the Ministry of Agriculture. They found that that was an approach and that was in 2002, in order to run programs targeted to family farms and to land reform. So in conclusion, I would like to say that from my own perspective, the future is not bleak. The future can be bright. Food prices are on the increase. Sometimes it should work as an incentive to producers. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Could be a bit of a difficulty for those who are in urban areas, but shouldn't be seen as a bad thing. I think it's an incentive. Agriculture, luckily, is now top of the agenda again. I think perhaps also given the crisis. Commercial farming, it's on the increase in Africa, perhaps because in parts of Africa there is still considerable land available, but this can also bring some other benefits, other collateral benefits, and small-scale farming can integrate through contract farming, outgrowers, etc. Africa has got enormous potential. Even countries that are oil producers are looking for land to produce their own food, and some of them are coming to Africa. So relying on imports can be risky. Market is very volatile. Prices are very high. In 2008, we saw cases, people going around with dollars not finding grain to buy. And if you find, you buy 3 times the price. I think what needs to happen is that the different pieces of the puzzle need to be in the right places. And once we get that, we get the systems in place, the potential, the hidden potential in the small-scale farming sector can be unlocked, and I think they can contribute significantly to food security. Thank you.